Lock her up. Lock her up. Lock her up. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Welcome to High Quality Podcast Action. Lock her up. Oh, God.
After Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah.
Just a
I'm
week.
sorry. I've been having this issue. Lock her. Jeez.
You need to calm down. That's hell of a sinus infection you have.
Yeah, I know. Lock her. Okay. I'm good. Um, John, I got a question for you in light of Thanksgiving's passing.
Yes.
Here's a quandary. What do shrink wrap turkeys and the Higgs boson have in common?
They're both elusive?
No, not quite. The answer is electron accelerators. Weaker, very much weaker electron accelerators when you're shrink wrapping a turkey, but it is an industrial application of particle acceleration. So there's some applied physics, you didn't even know was at your grocery store. So how about that?
Suppose that's one application.
Yeah, shrink wrap turkeys.
All right. We're on your particle accelerators to wrap turkeys.
Yes, weird, it's the important things, not so much the discovery portion. Like, I remember a professor of mine said if you invent a new, like, titanium alloy, don't make a surgical implant, make a golf club.
Of course, it'll sell better.
Right, so so if you make a particle accelerator, don't find the Higgs boson, shrink wrap turkeys.
That's capitalism at work.
So we've had a fun-filled past 2 weeks. Definitely not a lack of stuff to talk about.
No, not at all.
We're
But first,
lock her up. Okay, I'm good.
first, after you rid yourself of that nasty infection you had,
Lock her up.
how was your Thanksgiving?
That was good, pretty good. No,
Yeah.
totally no political arguments that happened.
That's very good. Some people may not be so lucky. Our condolences to those who had to sit down with a crazy uncle or even parents who may have opposing political viewpoints and like to start quote unquote conversations that turn into arguments that degenerate into infighting.
Let's just talk about life, Fuck it. How's your life?
What are you thankful for? How's your life?
Yeah,
Let's be
that kind
together
of stuff.
because we aren't otherwise.
I only see most of my extended family like around this time of year anyway. So and I got to see a cousin I haven't seen in many many years, which was really nice. So
That's good.
and the food was good.
Yeah.
Um,
I spent mine alone making my own Thanksgiving dinner, which wasn't bad.
Did you get a shrink wrap turkey?
I did.
Whew.
But it was a small turkey because, good God, I don't need a whole turkey for myself.
You never think when you see a turkey that it's as much meat as it is.
It's a lot of meat. It's a lot of meat.
It is quite a bit.
But I made do. Made some turkey stuffing, pie, green bean casserole. Pretty simple.
Jeez, you went kind of nuts, actually.
I did. I still have leftovers. I'm
Oh my
still going to
God.
be going through them at least into the week after next.
There's no way those are still good.
They're not bad.
They're not
Tolerable.
bad. They're tolerable. Oh, okay.
That's pretty much what you say about most leftovers is they're tolerable. You gotta, eat your way through them.
After the third day, it's out. Trash can.
That's why you gotta eat them quick.
Right. That's why.
Anyway.
That's why you engorge yourself. Well,
So-
we could start off with a number of things,
We
could
could,
do-
and I want to bring one thing up because now that we're past Thanksgiving, we can talk about Christmas and not feel absolutely terrible.
Okay. Okay.
This
sure.
isn't really news, but Melania Trump doesn't really seem to know how to decorate the White House for Christmas.
Yeah. What the fuck are those Christmas trees?
Blood red. What is this? The Shining at the White House?
She's bringing a little Russia to the White House, And I don't mean Donald Trump. I mean like color scheme wise.
I saw the blood red Christmas trees of Melania Trump, and I don't know if it's like a shy or sly poke at Republicans in the White House, or I don't even think they cared. It's just a blatant lack of understanding for interior decorating. Like,
Or the
good God,
holiday. I don't know.
I mean, that was only one aspect of it. It seemed like there were some regular Christmas decorations around too, but fuck's sake, I would avoid that hallway like the plague if I lived there.
That is very creepy.
Ugh,
I'm surprised there have been no photoshops of the twins from The Shining.
I'm pretty sure there have. I saw a fair number of photoshops that were reasonably comical, but I don't remember if I saw the twins from The Shining. I'm sure somebody's thought of it, drew that parallel.
Can't share memes over audio, unfortunately.
Yeah, go to Reddit for that. Or 4chan if you're feeling adventurous.
Oh dear. Oh my.
Aside from that, what's gone on that has caused you to have this terrible infection?
Well, let's just say the thing about lock her up emails has come up again. And this time not with Hillary Clinton. It's
Who with?
Well, Ivanka Trump, of course.
Of all people.
Who, much like every other person in the Trump family who has done something sketchy, did an interview. I'll give her credit. She did it with ABC News instead of Sean Hannity. Looking at you, Mr. Trump Jr. She told ABC News in an interview, "All of my emails are stored and preserved. There were no deletions. There is no attempt to hide. There is no equivalency to what my father's spoken about." She's referring to Hillary Clinton's emails and him just yapping on about it since he, held his first rally. Ivanka seems to be missing the point, though, because use of a personal account for government business potentially violates, law requiring preservation of all presidential records, and also raises, security concerns, particularly over, say, classified information. Just, lock her up. Lock her up. I think I'm good. I'm took some kind of Robitussin. That should go away now.
Okay. It would get a little annoying after a while, I would assume.
I'm good now. I got some eggnog here. I even got a hot drink that I'm letting cool down.
Yeah.
I'm totally set.
Good.
For the long haul. If we go over an hour, I don't care. I'm ready.
We may, honestly.
Well, we took last week off, so it's not the end of the world.
That's true.
From here, let's see. What could we do? Well, Trump wants money for his border wall, or the border Gestapo fired tear gas at people that included toddlers, or California Attorney General Xavier Becerra is assessing whether the state can take legal action over the Trump administration's use of force against a caravan of migrants, or a decision of future threats to shut the border down with Mexico, or the Secretaries of State and Defense say there's no smoking gun or hard evidence showing the Saudi prince ordered the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Lindsey Graham said he's not voting on any key issues, whatever that means, until the CIA briefs senators on the killing of Khashoggi, or the Farm Bill deal is very close to being passed, or
the fact that Donald Trump's still denying climate change, even though the White House is saying differently.
Yeah, when you deny your own White House's, staff's information, little far gone. Or you're discrediting your own staff, which you appointed, which is really an indictment on yourself when you think about it.
I mean, we can't really be surprised by that at this point.
Mm-hmm. Or Paul Manafort, or Brexit, or well, yeah, that's kind of all I got. Yeah.
We could take a turn away from the idiocy of U.S. politics and look at the idiocy of U.K. politics.
Oh, well, we never have before. This will be our first international leap across the pond.
We're going to shake hands with Theresa May. Ugh.
Oh, very exciting.
So,
would you rather
I don't know how much you know about the whole Brexit process, but you remember back in a couple years ago, 2016-ish,
yes,
the UK held a referendum vote on whether or not to leave the the European Union. There were some issues that proponents of the exit, now known as Brexit, had with the EU trade deals specifically, or at least that's what they were campaigning on, was trying to get a better position for the UK in terms of having more power to strike up deals with other countries that don't involve the EU regulations and having to pay into the European Union's coffers, as it were. But as most people who were in the opposing camp to the Brexiteers, I guess we can call them,
The ones who Google searched what is Brexit after the vote passed.
those people who may have been mildly ill-informed, the opponents to this were rightly justified in their skepticism about the actual validity that an exit from the European Union would have. The advantages to the UK are slim and not guaranteed by any means, which is part of the issue that Theresa May and her kind of hodgepodge of conservative and I guess it's like Democratic Unionist Party. Essentially, they didn't have enough people in the conservative right of the British government parliament to have a majority to push through the Brexit itself. So they had to ally themselves with another political party in order to have the votes to move forward with it. Now, this brings up some issues that are now present in the deal negotiation or agreement negotiation for leaving the European Union. The Democratic Unionist Party is made up of a large portion of Northern Ireland, a Protestant vote, as it were. And if you remember from the 70s through to the late 90s, there was such a thing known as the Troubles in Ireland, which makes mention to political strife and some infighting between the Southern Ireland, or the Republic of Ireland, and Northern Ireland, where Northern Ireland wanted to separate completely from Ireland, and infighting happened. Lots of people were killed in infighting with paramilitary-esque organizations and things of that nature that we would like to avoid having happen again. The transition to the European Union sort of sated that issue, and one of the points brought up, or desires brought up, by the now allied Unionist Party is that Northern Ireland would like to have their own border established between Southern Ireland and themselves to keep people from Southern Ireland and goods from Southern Ireland coming in and out of Northern Ireland, and to basically be joined to the rest of the UK in a more communal way. This creates some issues because establishing a border between Southern Ireland and Northern Ireland could reignite the Troubles in some people's estimations and lead to some further distasteful actions going on that nobody really wants. So complicating the already dicey situation of trying to leave the European Union, who, of course, wants a tough policy on Britain for imports and exports of goods from the European Union, while Britain would like to have more freedom. We run into a clash of what turns into just a political quagmire because parties in Britain who are part of the parliament are really only vying for the next political cycle, the next election, as it were. So the left Labour Party of the UK is seeking to undermine the Conservative Unionist Party's advancement of Brexit in order to secure more of a majority within the parliament. And they don't really care all that much about Brexit or trying to come to any kind of common ground and find a means to pass a bill with the EU or pass an agreement that would be reasonably advantageous for both parties involved. And then Theresa May is attempting to be ye old Margaret Thatcher, which is not working.
Very few women
Margaret
could.
Thatcher she is.
Yes, very few women could be Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah. So that's kind of the gist of things. It's a shitstorm. And I, for one, kind of feel a little better about how our shitstorm is. At least we're not trying to leave a European Union.
I mean,
even though we are considerably shooting ourselves in the foot repeatedly.
This is just an example of what a nationalist mentality will just lead you to. Like even our country, as big as our economy is here, if we go the nationalist route, that just makes our economy smaller, you know? And that's what's gonna, in large part, happen with the UK. Their interest rate is probably gonna go pretty darn high, I would imagine, once Brexit is complete. And the last time that happened was probably, I don't know, right before a worldwide recession.
Yep. Not that we need one of those again.
No. And even the Bank of England is having all this sort of doom and gloom predictions. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst kind of scenario.
Yeah.
So time will tell, but you know, the predictive capability in this day and age for this kind of stuff is pretty sharp. So I don't think there's anybody who's saying like looks good. I'm not really seeing that.
If anybody is saying that it looks good, they're either on something or they are in some politician's pocket.
Be my one or the other, or both.
Or both, yeah, probably both. As a point of note, the Bank of England apparently said that the GDP of the UK would have been at least 1% higher in 5 years' time if the UK had voted to remain in the European Union.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no benefit other than going further right to leaving EU as it stands right now.
No. They've started a train that they have to keep on the tracks, and they're doing a real shit job of it.
Well, you know who's not doing a shit job?
Honestly, no.
Robert Mueller.
Good point.
He tore up the Paul Manafort plea deal because Manafort lied again about something.
Go figure.
I imagine that Mueller took the plea deal and tore it up. You know how you tear something up? You want to tear it up a bunch of times, so you tear it in half, put those halves over each other, tear it in half again, and just keep doing that until it's confetti. Mm-hmm. That's what I imagine Mueller did.
I hope that's what he did.
I hope so. So, and a report yesterday said that Manafort's legal team was talking with Trump's legal team about what Manafort had answered to Mueller during the, I guess, plea deal negotiations. And then, of course, Trump turned his answers in 2 weeks ago. Here's what I think happened. Something similar to how the NBA had tracked down who was leaking front office information. They gave all 30 teams different documents so that only those teams that received them would know that. And then whatever was reported to the press, they could track what team was, leaking stuff. So Detroit Pistons front office, shame on you. I think something similar happened here. I think Mueller said something that only Manafort and his legal team would know about, and that kind of trickled down to Trump, and Trump answered something that hinted to Mueller that Manafort had lied. That he was probably asked, your legal team's not in communications with Trump in any fashion. He said no. He looked at Trump's answers for something, and he had something in there that clearly showed that they were, and that plea deal is now null and void, torn up, shredded into confetti. Celebrate your jail time, Mr. Manafort.
Woo!
And it looks like there may be more to come. Who can really say? I mean, it just seems like big stuff like this happens at random.
It happens at random, and it seems like there's not much of a major response, which, in my opinion, is kind of good. It's not a very quick process, as lawyering isn't usually. It takes time and a lot of background research and digging and writing lawyerese to make sure that indictments and everything that has been going on with this particular investigation is done properly and correctly by the rule of law, which thus far it has been. And there's no reason to believe that it wouldn't have been, which I think is part of the reason, other than maybe the fact that Donald Trump and the majority of people who were involved with his administration might have done a few illegal things.
Just a few.
Just a few.
I mean, can you imagine if in 2000, what it would have been, 2010, after Obama's first, or halfway through his first term?
Yeah.
Can you imagine at that point if a former campaign manager of his and all these security advisors had all been indicted by a special counsel? Like, when do you think the impeachment proceedings would have begun,
That day.
I mean, it's pretty clear this is just, this is just the hypocrisy coming from that party. They play by their own set of rules, and everyone else plays by another.
Mm-hmm. Considering the fact that the Senate today passed a bill that has essentially no further protections for the special counsel investigation. And I should say, not the Senate itself, but Republicans in the Senate.
What was it? This bill had bipartisan support, though. What was it? Oh. Who wrote?
Yeah, working bipartisanly a while ago.
What was that op-ed in the Washington Post?
Yeah,
or not Washington. Not Washington Post. New York Post, I think.
Very Well, I wouldn't say very intelligent turtle. For a turtle, it's.
He's got glasses. He kind of sounds like this.
Yeah.
Oh, Mitch McConnell.
Mm-hmm.
Lock him
That's
up.
who it is. Yeah, things don't look good yet, but there are certainly advantages to having more indictments and sentencing of individuals who are very clearly guilty of basically undermining democracy.
Which is happening every day on levels we may not be able to see at the moment.
Unfortunately so. It's been happening for years, decades even.
It
But
just
we don't
didn't
need to
know
get
it.
into that wormhole right now.
With the slide of the hand, boom, democracy's gone.
Gasp. I hope not.
The U.S. Senate today voted to advance a resolution to end U.S. military support for the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen's civil war.
Mm.
Possibly setting the stage for a final vote within days. Underscoring bipartisan unhappiness with President Trump's response to the humanitarian crisis in Yemen and the murder of Jamal Khashoggi at a Saudi consulate. Many of Trump's fellow Republicans even joined Democrats and advanced the measure by a supermajority vote. Well, as supermajority as you can get in this time. A vote of 63 yeas to 37 nays.
That's such a sad supermajority figure.
I mean, take what you can get these days.
I guess 10 more than half is... Yeah, whatever.
Hey, you know what you could get right now?
What?
And that you probably already have right now?
In my hand, about to go in my mouth?
Yeah.
It's my beer of the week.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Knew it.
And
Beer of the week.
It's one of my favorites.
Really?
Especially for this time of year, I might add.
You're doing Bud Light?
Fuck you.
You know, I like those commercials with the king. Those are so funny. I mean, Bud Light sucks, but the commercial is pretty funny.
They do. Still, my favorite commercial, which will probably be my favorite commercial for all time, at least in terms of beer commercials. And I think this was only one that aired in select parts of the Midwest during the Super Bowl. It was a ad for Old Milwaukee beer, which, if you're not familiar, is essentially it's Budweiser-esque beer on that level. But it was the one with Will Ferrell walking in a cornfield, and he gets up to the camera, and at the very end of the ad, cracks open an Old Milwaukee and begins to say, Old Milwaukee. And that's the end of the commercial. It's fantastic. Great job, Old Milwaukee. I still don't drink your beer, but
they cut him off.
They just cut him off.
That reminds me of the Miller High Life commercial. You remember the truck driver delivery guy?
Yes.
Said like, oh, you only need a 1 second commercial, and there really was a 1 second commercial in Super Bowl.
I remember that.
It's just him going High Life.
Yep.
Beer ads, man.
Yeah, those mid 2000s beer ads that back when I actually had cable.
Well, let's hear your beer ad for this favorite beer of yours.
So I can guarantee my German pronunciation is going to get shit on by someone somewhere. But this is a beer that is near and dear to my heart. And it is a Ach Schlenkerla Rauschbier Marzen.
You gave it a good go.
I gave it a good go.
It's good.
But it is a Rauschbier, which is German for smoked beer. And this particular brewery makes a variety of different smoked beers. This was the first smoked beer of theirs and first smoked beer in general that I ever had. And it is still my favorite out of all of them that I have had. It smells like wood cured bacon, and it tastes pretty similar, but don't let that deter you from trying it yourself.
It tastes like smoked bacon.
It tastes like smoked malt.
Smoked malt
is what it tastes like. Basically, it's smoked barley, and the barley is smoked over, I believe, beechwood logs. And then some hops and such are added to it, and it's matured in a cellar for a few months, and then those barrels that it's matured in are tapped and served directly at the brewery or packaged and bottled and sent everywhere else in the world. What attracted me to it first was the fact that it smelled like bacon. Of course. But also because it comes in a Stein-sized glass and it's extremely smooth. It's got a 5% ABV, so it's totally drinkable. And you can have like 10 to 15 pints of beer before you're hammered. It works out great.
So, how many Steins out of 5 are you giving this?
I would definitely give it a 5.
Whoa, that's our first 5.
It is easily the go-to winter beer for me, and it is decidedly winter here in upstate New York.
Yeah, it snowed today here.
Yep, same here. Snowed, cold, actually windy for once, which is a bit of a rarity. It's always fun when you see people who aren't used to actual cold weather walking around on a college campus. You can tell them by sight because they're usually shivering even though they have a coat on because they don't understand the concept of layering. Or, at least on the East Coast, they own Canada Goose jackets because somehow college students can afford $1,000 winter coats.
I mean, it is kind of Ivy League. You would think either you just got a lot of scholarships or, you're kind of rich to go to. But
I mean, to each their own, but
I guess.
I enjoy my leather jacket and other layering techniques keep me toasty in the winter months.
I'll watch this.
Also beer.
Does beer keep you warm?
Yeah, beer, maybe some vodka.
Beer and vodka. Speaking of vodka, I watched this segment from 60 Minutes Australia
Okay.
about the coldest inhabited place on Earth. Permanently inhabited place.
Is it in Siberia?
So it's in Siberia. The town itself is called Oymyakon.
Good Russian name.
Yes, there's about 500 to 900 people living there. Of course, Russia, I guess, hasn't done a census since 2010, so estimates are roughly 500 to 900, if you can believe that.
Probably because they don't care.
Yeah, probably. I don't know how much Russia cares about the census there.
I think they probably only care about the natural resources that Siberia is able to provide.
Probably. So what makes this place so cold is that there are 2 main valleys on either side of it, and these valleys trap wind inside the town and just create this really cold climate. And in the segment, they said that children are still allowed to go to school as long as it is above negative 55 degrees Celsius, which is negative 67 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's without wind chill.
Yep.
Woo!
Guess what the record low is?
Somewhere in the 70s, probably. Negative 70s.
In Celsius, or is that Fahrenheit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Celsius.
Celsius, the record is negative 67.7. Negative 89.9.
Okay.
Fahrenheit. And surprisingly, not much precipitation during the winter. Most happens during the summer months, where it can even reach averages of the upper 60s and lower 70s. If you can
Hmm,
believe that.
I can.
But yeah,
Antarctica, after all, is a desert. Fun fact.
it's true. Desert does not always mean sand. It is
Nope.
a lack of hospitable conditions.
It's a lack of rainfall specifically. Generally less than 10 inches in a year.
I cannot believe people live in this place. It seems freaking awful.
Well, when you're considerably close to the Arctic Circle or in the Arctic Circle,
They're not
and
even
you're,
in the Arctic Circle. That's the even more shocking thing.
hmm, well, I'm sure they still have to deal with permafrost.
Oh, the reporter, on some occasions, they'd have to tell him that the tip of his nose was turning white, meaning that frostbite was like the early stages of frostbite were setting in. He'd have to
Jesus.
have his scar cover his face again.
Yeah, that can
Oh,
happen.
it was just, and there's no pipes there because it would just freeze. So you have to go to an outhouse to go to the bathroom.
Yep,
And people there are
that's
like, I couldn't live anywhere else. Like, have you been anywhere else?
probably not.
Because it's pretty remote too. I think that's probably worse than the extreme cold. Is just how remote it is.
Yeah,
But hey, we're from Nebraska. People still live there. It's no
people think
Yukon.
Nebraska's remote.
It's not for everyone. Yep.
It's not, which apparently is the new state motto.
Yeah, we went from the good life to Nebraska nice, which is just stealing Minnesota's uh
Basically.
slogan, to it's not for everyone. Good work.
We've gone full self-deprecation, which I think is pretty on brand for the majority of people that are from Nebraska.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So speaking of inhospitable places, we landed on Mars.
We did.
We did.
That's right. I didn't get to watch it live, which
I
sucks.
did. It was about as exciting as watching a room full of scientists and engineers celebrate something that they've worked for almost 10 years on, successfully land on a planet a few 100 million miles away.
300, I think, is the estimate.
Yeah,
It
I think
traveled
it was
300
around
million.
150 million miles away or kilometers, one of the two, when the landing was going on. But an amazing accomplishment because the majority of Mars missions, landers, rovers that attempt to land on the Martian surface do not make it.
I don't think people
They,
realize that a pretty. I think it's almost like a third of missions that have gone to Mars did not
yep,
make it.
yeah, it's a very small number that we actually see land on the Martian surface. And it's a constant reinvention of landing techniques that are used for each mission. I don't know if you remember the rovers that landed with the bouncy house method of
Yes,
inflatable air cushions.
very funny video to watch.
Mm-hmm. Very entertaining. That was one method. This method used the EDL, which I don't know off the top of my head the actual expansion of that acronym, but using a couple of small CubeSats to monitor the landing procedure and relay information to and from Earth or primarily to Earth from the lander. The EDL method uses the atmosphere to land the rover safely, essentially in the same manner as, or very similar manner to how it's in the Apollo command module re-entered into the Earth's atmosphere, save for the fact that the Martian atmosphere is much closer to the surface and is much thinner than the Earth's atmosphere. So there's a lot less drag that you can take advantage of. So with the EDL procedure, the angle of attack was much shallower. I think
That isn't. It was still 12 degrees, wasn't it?
it was, but that's far less aggressive than what you would use with going into the, or what you could use going into the Earth safely, at least for humans and delicate scientific instrumentation.
Hmm.
The procedure also involved not a full landing, but or not a full landing of the capsule itself, but a command module sort of shaped reentry device with a heat shield and conical section behind it that would enter at the 12-degree angle into the atmosphere, slow down, and then jettison a supersonic parachute to slow down further, and then jettison the actual lander itself that would use some retrofire rockets to safely reach the Martian surface and land appropriately. So a multi-stage process, everything went off without a hitch, at least it seems so far. Pictures have started coming back from the lander of its surroundings, and lucky for NASA, or maybe even partly by design, the lander InSight touched down in a sand-filled crater, not on anything that is sizable that could put it off kilter or make for setting up its instruments a problem.
Perfect.
So, A plus again from NASA and all of the engineers and scientists involved about that. Great job. And they can now go about getting the instruments ready for initial placement and verification that they survived. One, being launched out of Earth's atmosphere on a rocket. Two, transporting themselves 150 million miles to another planet, and then entering into an atmosphere and landing. That process will take about 3 months, roughly. And we mentioned this before, but for reiteration, the instruments and objectives for the InSight mission are a couple of seismometers, temperature probes, some X-band radio, and environmental sensors, and of course cameras to return some pictures and serve as a means of identifying whether instruments are properly set up. The objectives being to discover or uncover how a rocky planetary body forms and evolves by investigating the interior structure by way of using seismometers and the temperature probes to determine tectonic activity, meteorite impacts, things like earthquakes that could be caused by either of those, to see how waves of pressure move through the Martian interior, and by way of extrapolation determine what the hell the interior of Mars is made of. How similar is it to Earth's interior and the composition of the interior of the Earth? Tectonic activity of the Earth is associated with Mars, and broaden the understanding of rocky planetary objects.
Come a long way from Mariner 4, 1965.
That we have. And we'll continue to push the boundaries. It's interesting to see the Planetary Society talk about pushing for return of a sample from Mars on a lander in the future.
Let's bring it back down to Earth. Although,
Okay.
you know, if you're not following the InSight page on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or wherever it's at, you should. They post all sorts of pictures as they receive them.
JPL's website as well to get
Yes.
up-to-date information on pictures that are released that will come back from the rover, or lander, I guess in this case. It's not a rover. But
Yeah, get it right.
those pictures will be updated, maybe not daily, but pretty frequently.
So, let's see here. Which one I want to start with? I'll do this one. It is concerning Alzheimer's disease.
Oh, good.
No, yeah, no one in my family has had the disease, but I know it does affect a lot of people.
My grandma had it. Not the
Um,
greatest fun time in the world, but
no, not at all.
you
Not
know,
at all. The NIH's National Institute of Aging simply defines Alzheimer's disease as an irreversible progressive brain disorder that slowly destroys memory and thinking skills and eventually the ability to carry out the simplest of tasks. It is currently ranked as the sixth leading cause of death in the United States, but recent estimates that factor in unreported deaths due to Alzheimer's indicate that the disorder may rank third behind heart disease and cancer as a cause of death for older people. The cause is not fully understood. It could be genetics, environment, and lifestyle. All could be factors or a combination thereof. And there's been a lot of research to better understand how Alzheimer's develops, and that will in turn help to better treat it. So this little story I'm going to tell you about is about a new study concerning your chromosomes. In the 1970s, scientists discovered that certain cells could shuffle and edit DNA through a process known as somatic recombination. Similar to meiosis, that creates 4 granddaughter cells, or daughter 2 cells, if you want to be all super biology on me, each with half the number of chromosomes as the parent cell. Somatic recombination is a specialized type of cell division. Where meiosis and somatic recombination differ is that the derivative cells do not have the same number of chromosomes as the parent cell. This could be, for example, the loss of a segment of a chromosome or the translocation of segments of non-homologous chromosomes. Homologous just means identical in this case. Biology just has to be so different, you know. Now,
so special.
I know, right? It's not the study of life or whatever they like to call themselves.
Nah,
It's ridiculous.
it's lame.
So some of where we see this mostly is in your immune cells, namely B and T cells, will snip out sections of genes that code for proteins that detect or fight pathogens and splice the remaining pieces together to create new varieties. Our B cells, for example, can potentially spawn about 1 quadrillion types of antibodies. And scientists have seen hints that such genomic reshuffling, I got those 2 words switched around. I almost said genomic reshuffling. Not quite right. Genomic reshuffling
Sounds right to me.
takes place in our brains. Neurons often differ dramatically from one another, as you may know. Or not. You do now. They often have more DNA or different genetic sequences than the cells around them. And this sort of genome tampering may expand the brain's protein repertoire, but it may also promote Alzheimer's disease. To look for definitive evidence of somatic recombination in the brain, neuroscientists analyzed neurons from the donated brains of 6 healthy elderly people and 7 patients who had the non-inherited form of Alzheimer's disease, which accounts for a vast majority of the cases of Alzheimer's disease. And let me clarify that all these people passed away. Just to be clear.
Rest in peace.
They tested whether these cells harbored different versions of the gene for the amyloid precursor protein, or APP. The source of the plaques, which is the source of plaques in the brains of people who have Alzheimer's disease. So why APP? One of neuroscientists' previous studies suggested neurons from patients with Alzheimer's disease can harbor extra copies of the APP gene, an increase that could arise from somatic recombination. New analysis shows the neurons seem to carry not one or two variants of the APP gene, but thousands of variants. Some changes involving switching single nucleotide bases, those being the adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. So even just the smallest change in the building block of DNA can completely change the new cells once they've divided, which is crazy to think about. I guess you could say it's kind of like a bug, if you want to think of it that way. Think of it as computers. Just the littlest thing can cause a big change in your operating system, in this case, your brain. So
Very important operating system.
I would say there's no updating that thing right there once it's gone.
Nope.
So in some cases, the APP gene variants had jettisoned chunks of DNA. A lot of just chunks of them. They don't use that word likely. Chunks. The remaining sections had knitted together. It was also discovered that neurons from the patients with Alzheimer's disease contained about 6 times as many varieties of the APP gene as did the cells from the healthy patients. Among the alterations in the neurons of people who had Alzheimer's disease, there were 11 mutations that occur in rare inherited forms of the illness. Neurons from subjects who died without the disease didn't have those mutations. So this is the point in science where we're on to something. But we're not quite there yet. So rather than having one constant blueprint that stays with us throughout life, neurons seem to have the ability to change that blueprint. And that capability may benefit neurons by enabling them to generate a medley of APP versions that enhance learning, memory, and other brain functions. But on the other hand, somatic recombination may promote Alzheimer's disease in some people by producing harmful versions of the protein or by damaging brain cells in other ways. Where do all these gene variants come from? Good question, John. I'm glad you asked it.
Where do all these gene variants come from,
Good
Nick?
question, John. I'm glad you asked it.
Thanks.
Neuroscientists think gene reshuffling depends on an enzyme called reverse transcriptase, which if you know anything at all about DNA and cell division, you will notice a lot of words that end in ASE. This is no different. What does this do? It makes DNA copies of RNA molecules. So a new variant could arise when a neuron produces an RNA copy of the APP gene. This step is part of the cell's normal procedure to produce proteins. However, reverse transcriptase may then recopy the RNA molecule to make a DNA duplicate of the APP gene that slips back into the genome. But because reverse transcriptase is a sloppy copier, this new version may not attach the original gene, and it may code for a different variant of APP. Drugs that block reverse transcriptase are actually part of standard treatment for HIV infection. And this research suggests they might also work against Alzheimer's disease. Some scientists, obviously, this is just the nature of science, they want more evidence that this enzyme has a role in it. This is sort of the first study that's had that result to indicate that this APP gene may have a role in producing, or not producing, but contributing to Alzheimer's disease. And although it looks like reverse transcriptase is involved, there's a lot of work to do to establish that. Treating Alzheimer's patients with drugs that inhibit reverse transcriptase would be premature to say the least, when currently we just don't have data to support using it in Alzheimer's treatment. But scientists did not detect signs of somatic recombination in cells from other organs or in a different gene that's active in the brain. Sorry, human body, you're just not quite there yet.
Womp womp.
However, the process could be revising other genes as well. We could be looking at an entirely new mechanism for generating diversity in the brain, and it is important to emphasize that other groups need to replicate the work to confirm this unexpected finding, but if somatic recombination occurs in neurons, it could also be involved in other brain diseases, such as Parkinson's disease. So, what have we learned?
Biology and anatomy and associated terminology is not something that I'm familiar with. Didn't take anatomy in high school or college.
Oh, that was such a fun class in high school. You missed out.
Yeah, I took advanced chemistry instead.
Well, but basically the gist of this is that through a specialized form of cell division where your brain can make new gene variants of a specific protein chain, may contribute to Alzheimer's disease because an enzyme that copies DNA may accidentally make a copy of something it shouldn't have. Just to put it very layman's terms and very poorly.
Hey, I'm all about layman's terms in that instance. Interesting.
Very
Hopefully
interesting.
progress towards determining some kind of treatment or even cure for Alzheimer's in the future.
I definitely think it's onto something. We haven't really had much of a concrete way of determining that, or, any risk for Alzheimer's other than, hey, anyone in your family had it?
Yep. It's kind of the same thing with cancer. And I would assume that the treatment for Alzheimer's, when a treatment is designed or synthesized, would be similar to kind of the advancements we've seen in cancer treatments over the years, where we have more targeted treatments depending upon hormone levels in the individual, or whether that person has had a history of cancer themselves or their family, and actually being able to target specific types of either estrogen-based or testosterone-based cancers. But I'm also not a biomedical engineer, so can't say that I have any major background in that.
I'm a biomedical engineer and I don't either. So what you definitely understand about the sciences is that people specialize in something. Cancer is no different. Mm-hmm. Cancer in, whether it be prostate cancer or brain cancer, they're very different. And one doctor who does research in one is not going to do research in the other, unless somehow someone shows they relate, which isn't too often.
No, very rare.
Anyway,
very rare indeed.
Let's get to some happier stuff, right?
Well,
I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily happier, but it doesn't deal with, life-threatening diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's disease.
Why don't we hang on to that for the end, to end on a happy note?
Oh, okay.
Because I have one more topic that I'd like to go over.
Sure.
That I guess we can tie in a couple topics here. So this last week, General Motors announced that they would be cutting up to 14,000 workers in North America and putting up to 5 plants for possible closure as it moves away from sedans and cars towards trucks and SUVs, as seemingly has been the trend for the majority of the auto industry in the U.S. Now, some news outlets have attributed this in part to the tariffs that the Trump administration has placed on aluminum and steel products from China, which we'll get to in a minute. But this doesn't seem to have any kind of contribution from that. The reduction in GM's workforce, which is approximately 8% of their total workforce of about 180,000 employees, is really just following market trends. And it happens to coincide with a terrible administration that had touted the fact that all of the auto jobs will be coming back to Detroit and the Rust Belt. So says Donald Trump. Which is a lie, if you couldn't tell.
You know, my parents just bought a car. It wasn't a GM car, but it was an SUV.
Yeah.
And my dad traded in a sedan. So there's that.
Yep. Wait, he traded in his Mercedes?
What? My dad doesn't drive a Mercedes anymore.
Yep. Not since he got his SUV.
I mean, it was getting annoying having a rear-wheel drive car in a city that has, you know, winter 6 to 7 months out of the year.
And real shit road control.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. That's more of the problem than the winter itself. But
so he now drives an SUV too.
Yeah, there you go. Goes to show the market is changing. And GM and Ford and a number of other companies are following suit with this trend. Not only is GM looking to cut a fair amount of both blue-collar and white-collar workers, both from the U.S. and Canadian plants, but so is Ford, which is looking to restructure, laying off an hereto unspecified number of white-collar workers, and Toyota cutting costs, even though they're supposedly building a plant in Alabama, or planning to at least. This restructuring is nothing new. This has happened in the past with auto companies tending more towards SUVs, trucks, and electric cars, or even autonomous vehicles, riding the coattails of Tesla. But the unfortunate circumstances, of course, are the workers themselves being put out in the cold, literally, this time of year, northern Ohio. The unfortunate consequence of all of this being that there really isn't anything else in Ohio or Detroit or the surrounding areas to do for work except work at auto companies, plants.
I heard this story about the plant in Detroit, how it was like on the border between Detroit and another town, and how they like had leveled this neighborhood of houses and churches and all this other stuff to build this plant. And that wasn't that long ago either, and now that plant's being closed.
Yep. And it's not like any of those houses or neighborhoods are going to be coming back because there's nothing to bring them back.
Right.
So there's at least one senator, a Democratic senator, Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio, who was quoted as stating that tax breaks received as part of the Republican tax bill from last year have eliminated jobs. GM has taken that tax bill and eliminated jobs instead of using that windfall to invest in American workers, which is a pretty common trend, unfortunately, when large companies take tax breaks from a sympathetic Republican body who is really looking to pack their pockets with further money from these individuals who may be at the head of these companies that don't really have a care in the world about blue-collar workers. There are certain companies that will reinvest in the American people and talent that is present within those individuals. But unfortunately, the larger a firm gets, the more global they are, even though GM is also looking to close 3 plants in 8 in addition to the 5 that they're closing in America for restructuring. The human capital investment is still a problem that I've seen, having been involved in a manufacturing environment in the past, that while my company that I worked for had a pretty reasonable sense of investing in human capital, the rest of the world and rest of the US is unfortunately not yet on that trend, and I'm not entirely sure that they ever will be.
Well, this is why
But
they outsource stuff to Mexico and really don't care about illegals crossing the border because they can pay them much less money here in America or abroad. Like, there's a reason that stuff leaves like that. And I don't think people really considered that, some cars not selling well was part of the issue. But let's be real. That is in no way, shape, or form the major motivator behind what's happening here. And Trump had a great solution. Did you hear Trump's solution?
no, enamor me.
Make better cars. Or no, I'm sorry, make cars that sell better. Brilliant. Art
Wonderful
of the deal.
strategy.
From the mind that brought you the art of the deal.
Christ. So speaking of deals and somewhat underhanded or under the table deals, with reference to the tariffs that President Trump put in place on both aluminum and steel, although primarily concerning aluminum, there is a company or an aluminum distributor in the Midwest who has been taking advantage of the tariff set up by Donald Trump to exclude its imports from any of the levies of those tariffs. And not just on a small scale, but upwards of 600 million pounds of aluminum from places such as Greece, Italy, France, Norway, and China, the place that the tariffs were put in place to prevent excess material from being imported into the U.S. Strange, you might say,
Very strange.
that this is happening,
Yeah, it's very strange.
but this company is not the only company to take advantage of this seeming loophole or lack of investigation or enforcement of these tariffs.
No way.
There are 3,000 other requests that could possibly exempt Chinese-made metal products from the tariffs in the U.S. Essentially, United States companies are using the fact that the staffing of the department that is in charge of enforcing these tariffs is severely below what it should be to handle the necessary amount of exclusion requests, which are on the order of 52,000 for steel exclusion and 6,700 for aluminum exclusion requests. And that's just through early November. We are now nearing December. I can only assume that those figures have gone up by quite a number. The amount of requests for exclusion from these tariffs that the department had ruled on were about 18,000 or 36% for steel and just under 1,000 or about 15% for the aluminum. 3/4 of those steel decisions were approved. 85% were approved for aluminum. Part of that is because the Chinese products or imported products are a different alloy from what the United States is capable of producing or has a demand for to produce. And although I don't know what alloy that is, it could be one of the cheaper alloys, a 6061 alloy perhaps, which is used in everything from aluminum cans to particle accelerator components. I would know. I order a shitload of it.
Keep coming back to the particle accelerator.
Hey, it's where I work. So, as I think we and a number of other people anticipated, the tariffs levied by Donald Trump's administration are not really doing much of anything except making it harder for U.S. manufacturers, fabricators, interior decorators even, to be competitive in their existing infrastructure and interface with oversees suppliers of materials. As a representative, Lloyd Doggett from Texas said, Trump talks tough, but carries a flimsy stick. I would say that I would use a different adjective to describe that stick. Still with an F and an L. I would say Trump talks tough, but carries a flaccid stick.
Ooh. Oof.
Wet noodle, even.
Oof.
That's all I've got on that.
That cuts deep. Deep. You know what else cuts deep? Deep into the earth.
A hole?
Oh, there's going to be some holes, that's for sure. But
Ooh. I'm already excited.
travel back to around the same time that the ancient Egyptians were building their mighty pyramids, another animal was also building their own pyramids. Well, more mounds than pyramids.
We need a Twilight Zones theme or something going on in the background. There we go.
Hidden by northeastern Brazil's thorny scrub Caatinga forests, a semi-arid landscape covered by deciduous trees for years, members of the public, including scientists, began to discover these mounds only over the past few decades as the land was cleared for pasture. They were made by tiny termites digging through the earth and piling that earth into giant mounds that still exist today, and they're so massive they can be seen from space. Each mound are about 8 feet, 2.5 centimeters tall, with a diameter of about 30 feet, 9 meters, and each has nearly 1,800 cubic feet, or 50 cubic meters, of soil in them. And there are about 200 million of these mounds, spanning an area the size of Great Britain. See, I tied in Britain into this. It's cool, right?
Are they going to exit like the rest of Britain from?
Well, I don't know.
Never mind.
No one's asked them yet.
They don't have a Theresa May termite.
Actually, there's kind of a sort of EU style thing going on, but I'll get to that later.
I don't know if we should call Theresa May she's not the Iron Lady. She's more like a galvanized lady. That's a bad analogy. Forget that. I'll come up with something better.
I'm not cutting that, so you know that's staying in.
I know. Just
Okay.
I'm gonna think a little bit more on that one.
Okay. So soil samples date the mounds between 3,820 and 690 years old. That is the same age as the world's oldest known termite mounds in Africa. And taken together, these termites have excavated more than 2.4 cubic miles, or 10 cubic kilometers of earth, which is equivalent to the volume of about 4,000 Great Pyramids of Giza. And this is the greatest known example of ecosystem engineering ever seen by a single insect species. These mounds aren't nests, though. Over thousands of years, termites excavated dirt as they made an extensive interconnected tunnel system underground. Just like if you're, say, digging a hole to bury something, you put all the dirt in a pile. Only instead of putting that dirt back, you just leave it there for 4,000 years. It does not appear that aggression, this is where your Brexit comes in, it does not appear that aggression between local termites of neighboring mounds explained the mound's spacing. So there's no Jets and Sharks turf war going on, there's no Brexit EU stuff going on either. Rather, it's possible that the termites arranged the mounds based on the way the interconnected tunnels ran beneath them, as well as how the leaves that they ate episodically fell on the forest floor. Given the tunnel system's complexity, it is likely that a pheromone map helps guide the termites through the underground maze, as they do not have Google Maps available to them. The giant network also gives the termites a safe route to their sporadic leafy food supply, a similarity also seen in other burrowing animals, such as naked mole rat tunnels, because you can't be eaten above ground if you're never above ground.
Solid logic.
Right. Now here's some controversial stuff related to this discovery and research. Researchers investigated the mound's spacing, which resembles some of the world's unexplained mounds, which I did not know were a thing until I was reading this article.
Okay.
So
Widespread mounds.
Yes. There's unexplained mounds in the world. I did not know these existed, and when I went down this mound rabbit hole, I didn't expect all the stuff I found. So, well, hold on to your hats here, or your butts, whatever. Just put your hands
Or
on
your
something.
headphones.
Sit down, maybe if you're standing up. If you're going for a run, you might want to stop, maybe sit down, because shit's gonna get weird. Mima mounds are low, flattened, circular, dome-like natural mounds that are composed of loose, unstratified, often gravelly sediment that is an over-thickened topsoil. And they range anywhere from 3 to 50 meters in diameter and 30 centimeters to 2 meters in height. And there is no concrete theory for how Mima mounds formed. They're not located in one specific area. Their composition is different, even ones in the same geographic area. And explanations include a lot of different ideas. They include gophers, which is actually the most well-founded explanation, if you can believe that. Another one is the accumulation of wind-blown sediments around vegetation forming what are called nebkas. Another one is seismic activity, which is the least likely culprit, as it's never been observed in the natural universe. Or the shrinking and swelling of clays. And now, most of these outside the gopher theory apply to Mima mound-looking features, but are not true Mima mounds. No. I mean, maybe it was aliens. We don't know. And if you ever want to see some of these Mima mounds, southwest of Olympia, Washington is, and I'm not kidding, Mima Mounds Natural Area Preserve.
All right.
I'm telling you, I looked this up on Google Maps just to see what it looked like, and it looks so damn weird. Not only are these mounds all over the place, but they're like houses, and they're just in the middle of all this crap. It looks so damn weird. People just living among Mima mounds. If you're not reading some right now, just go to Google Maps, search MIMA Mounds Natural Area Preserve.
I have. It's interesting looking.
Right?
Kind of like the Shire, maybe.
The Shire is more rolling hills than these weird little, few meter across.
The mounds remind me of hobbit holes, but
mounds.
other than that. Anyway.
Another type of mound in the southwestern cape of South Africa, there are soil features called, here we go, huweltjies, which roughly translate from Afrikaans as small hill. I noticed while researching mounds that these look so out of place, like all of these. Like, they just look like someone dropped them in there, like just wherever. Some earth-creating being just kind of tossed them, just littered them on the ground. Now these mounds, these huweltjies, are no different in that they vary in composition and age. Radiocarbon dating has placed them as being 30,000 to 40,000 years old. And the most likely theory, again, is termites or rodents, maybe a little both, created these mounds. The other theory, not as likely, is called differential erosion. I don't want to make this segment any longer, so I'm not going to describe what that is. But if you're interested in geology and environmental science, look it up. It's pretty cool.
Internet's a wonderful place.
Yeah, you'll kind of find out a little more about how geology can affect where plants live. Anyway, finally, and this is a possible title right here.
Okay.
These mounds are called fairy circles.
I feel like I've heard of those.
I'm sure you have. They are probably the most well-known strange mound, if you want to call them that. Because this is the weirdest one of them all. They mostly appear in the Namib Desert in Namibia and western South Africa, but have also recently been found in Western Australia. Fairy circles are circular patches. I mean, like almost perfectly circular. If you just go and Google some, circular patches of land barren of plants, varying from 2 to 15 meters, 7 to 49 feet. Forgot to convert other units earlier. Sue me. In diameter. Often encircled by a ring of stimulated growths of grass. Now, studies show that these circles pass through a life cycle of some 30 to 60 years, after which they mature and, I'll say, die, although they're not, living, as they undergo an invasion, mainly by grasses or other vegetation. Now, there are, of course, the myths around them. After all, they're called fairy circles. The Himba people note that their original ancestor, Mukuru, was responsible for the creation of the fairy circles, or that they were the footprints of gods. Some Bushmen ascribe magical or spiritual powers to them. Some tour guides have said the circles are formed by a dragon in the earth, and that its poisonous breath kills the vegetation, leaving behind the fairy circles. Now, fairy circles, because they're a little more famous phenomenon, have had a lot more research done on them than Mima mounds or Howitges. No idea if I'm saying that right. I couldn't find a pronunciation.
I can't understand any of what that is, I will assume that it's reasonably close.
I don't know. Heuweltjies.
I'm not even going to try.
Don't bother.
Nope.
So, anyway, but a lot of research has been done with these. And research indicates that it could be most likely it's a combination of termites and resource competition between plants. There's a way that insects survive in arid environments, and it has to do with how they build their colonies, specifically in areas where moisture under the soil will kind of, I don't want to say pool because it sounds like it creates a little lake when it doesn't, but it's just in areas where there's more water available to it. So termites will go dig underneath that soil, and plants in turn will kind of compete for resources, forcing others out, and that's how you get these circles. So, even plants go to war for resources, albeit a very slow war, but still a war, I guess. The point of all this is that there's lots of mounds. They all look weird and out of place, and termites probably made them.
So, fun fact, I too have a mound story.
Does it involve candy bars?
No.
Okay, I'll allow it.
It involves engineering consulting. The only reason I know about this particular national monument called Effigy Mounds in Iowa is because I built a septic system for them. But it's a similar thing, albeit it involves Native American construction of mounds shaped like buffalo and birds native to the plains. Interesting little tie-in there that I know exists. I've never been myself, but they've got a great septic system. That I can attest to.
You can almost hear my head just nodding, and I cannot believe what I'm hearing.
My God. Also, I think I found an appropriate medal for Theresa May in lieu of the Iron Lady. She can be called the Barium Lady. Because
and why Barry?
Because it's never found in nature as a free element, not unlike Theresa May, who has to depend on everyone else to do her job effectively for her.
If our international audience may find that hilarious.
Hopefully.
Or
And on that note,
or not.
what's our title going to be this week?
Well, we're not really lacking on on subject
Material.
matter. Yeah. This is it's a problem of riches right now. Because we could just keep it simple and go like high quality mounds.
Throw an adjective in there and we'd probably be okay. Considering we talked reasonably extensive amount about politics, I always side on the end of high quality shit mounds. Which probably isn't too far off from the actual construction of those termite mounds you spoke of.
No, it probably isn't. Yeah. And they're not even living structures. They're just mounds. They just built it. You know, they're just digging in the dirt, and that's where they just threw the dirt, and it turned into these structures.
Yeah.
Freaking termites leaving their shit everywhere, you know? Clean up your construction site, you asshole termites.
Not professionals. They don't clean up after themselves.
Nope, not at all.
Bastards. So shit mounds it is?
High quality... High quality... I almost said high quality lock her mounds.
straying into some iffy territory there.
I don't want to spend too much time on it. High quality fairy circles.
High quality, you know, shit mounds was, I think, all I had.
I don't know if we want to put swear words in our title.
High quality poop mounds.
Poop. We already used the word poop.
Poop.
We've already used that word.
I know I was saying poop in reference to
Okay.
the fact that...
We're going to take longer to think of a title than to talk
Join
about.
us in another 30 minutes when we're still trying to figure out what the damn title is for the podcast.
High quality exit mounds.
High quality Thanksgiving mounds.
High quality exit mounds. Brexit mounds. I'm having too much fun. Let's see what else I can do.
Keep going.
Let's see. We could tie in Alzheimer's somehow.
Alzheimer's mounds?
High quality. High quality Mounds transcriptase. Let me have fun.
I don't mind that one.
No.
It's got kind of like a Latin-esque feel to it.
It's mysterious.
A little bit. It's also mildly ridiculous, which I'm always for.
Okay. All right. Sold.
That works.
Okay.
It only took us 4 minutes.
I wasn't looking at the clock. I was trying not to.
It was just an estimate. In any event, thank you for joining us again for another episode of High Quality Podcast Action, where we sit down and discuss topics du jour from the last week or two.
Topics a la carte.
I am one part of the podcasting duo, John.
I'm Nick, the other part of our two-part duo.
And we will see you next week with more politics, science, beer and who knows what.
Yeah, I need to come up with a weekly thing. I'm not going to, but I should.
You should.
But I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Have a high quality week.
See ya.